Let's welcome in Gary Barta, who is the chair of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. Gary, we're arguing about it. I don't understand it. Michigan State, game was only a week ago. You have Michigan State number 3. Why did Michigan move ahead of them despite losing to them just a week ago?
Well, the arguments were going on in the room, just like I'm listening to you guys go back and forth. A week ago, it was discussed that Michigan might be the more complete team, offensively, defensively, every statistic. Michigan's ahead of Michigan State, but the committee certainly gave Michigan the nod. They were undefeated. They beat Michigan head-to-head. What's different a week later? Michigan won. Michigan State lost. The discussion in the room went back and forth, very similar to what you're doing now, but at the end of the day, we felt as a committee that Michigan was a better team and to be ranked ahead of Michigan State this week. Stay tuned. We get to watch again next week.
That's true, and that was what I wanted to point out. It doesn't take many votes to change the order here. So how close was that voting when you got down to that 6 and 7 spot? How close was it?
There's no tally that's shown across the room. I can just tell you that the debate on this topic lasted a long time. This pairing alone probably took up about a half hour or maybe even longer.
And that was Gary Barta, College Football Playoff Chair, on with Reese Davis and ESPN, the College Football Playoff Top 25 show last night.
Reese is my guy. I love Reese.
He's so good. Again, Georgia 1, Alabama 2, Oregon jumped up to number 3, and Ohio State number 4. Cincy moved up to 5, Michigan at 6, Michigan State at 7, and at 8 is Oklahoma. They had the bye week. They stood pat. Braylon Edwards. There you go. Gary Barta says we talked about it in the room for about 30 minutes, this specific pairing. What do you do at 6 and what do you do at 7? How do you put Michigan in front of Michigan State in this case this week because of the head-to-head Michigan State beat Michigan?
With the exception of Cincinnati and Notre Dame, the rankings don't matter where they place it. So I'm a Michigan alum, but I'm biased when I do my information. I don't really care that Michigan's ranked ahead of Michigan State. Michigan State shouldn't care that they're ranked behind Michigan. You know why? It's because they have to play each other. They have to see each other. They have to play Ohio State as well. They have to play things out. So I wouldn't put too much stock in it. Now, this is the reason why Michigan, and I said this yesterday, I said Michigan will go ahead of Michigan State. The College Football Committee, they did not rank, they hadn't done any rankings when Ohio State and Oregon played. And then when Oregon beat Ohio State and then Oregon lost. So people are wondering why didn't they do it with Oregon? Because the College Football Committee wasn't ranking back then, they're ranking now. They had a chance to observe the whole season. What they've seen is we put Michigan State above Michigan. Although they still wanted, if you pay attention to Barta, he was saying that they, even with the loss, still wanted to rank Michigan above Michigan State based off what they saw on the field. They saw a better team overall than Michigan State. They saw some sketchy calls, in that game. With that being said, they put Michigan State third. The following week, less than 7 days after they put them third, Ryan, they lost to Purdue, a team that was unranked. And I don't want to hear all the Michigans about, well, that's where, top 5 teams go to lose. I don't want to hear that BS. It's later in the season now. You know who you are as a team. You know what you're supposed to do. You know who the teams are going to be that you're playing moving forward. You're week 10. You can't lose to Purdue and then expect to still be ranked ahead of Michigan. Michigan has 1 loss, and it's to Michigan State. And at the time they lost to Michigan State was 8. And then Michigan State went out there and lost. Michigan State has 1 loss. And it's to Purdue that's unranked on the road after they ranked them 3rd. Michigan, from top to bottom, is a better football team if you look at stats, if you look at numbers, if you look at all that, if you look at the way in which they win games. Michigan also, they went out there after being ranked 7th, after losing to Michigan State. How did they respond? They went and played Indiana. It was a home game. They slowed out of the blocks, as they say, in the first half of quarter or so, or quarter and a half, but then they finished strong. They were one of the only ranked teams to really finish strong. Notre Dame beating Navy and Michigan beating Indiana. They're the only 2 teams that really looked the part. They really looked the ranking. That's why they were ranked above Michigan State. Michigan State lost to an unranked Purdue, and Michigan went out there and played a team that Michigan State had struggled a little bit a couple weeks ago in Indiana, and that's why they're ahead. Not to mention, they're going to have to play each other anyway, and it doesn't matter. But the smart thing they did was they moved Cincinnati up a spot. They moved Cincinnati. They must have heard us talking, especially Maz. They moved Cincinnati up to that 5 spot to shut them up, keep them quiet, and keep them kind of close, to let the Big Ten conundrum play itself out, to let what's going to happen to Notre Dame play itself out, and let what's going to happen with Oklahoma at 8 and Oklahoma State at 10 play itself out. The committee made a really smart move last night, in my opinion.
Let me ask you guys this. hypothetical a few weeks out. MSU beats Ohio State. 2 weeks later, Michigan loses to Ohio State. What Big Ten team is going to get into Final Four?
Michigan State, without question.
They still have to play. Let's say they lose to Wisconsin.
Say that again.
Well, then no Big Ten team's getting in.
Okay.
So Ohio State loses to
MSU.
Okay.
They beat Michigan.
Okay.
Then MSU goes and craps the bed in the Big Ten championship game.
No Big Ten team gets in then. A 2-loss Michigan State team, a 2-loss Ohio State team, a 2-loss Michigan team, ain't nobody getting in. There's just too much.
So you're saying 1-loss Michigan State?
No, he's saying 2-loss because they lost to Wisconsin
I got
or Purdue.
I got them losing in the final. I just threw it hypothetical out there. That's all. Because we've talked about maybe getting 2 Big Ten teams in. But there's a chance that none of them could get in if my scenario comes through.
I still contend, I don't know, call me whatever name in the book you want. I contend to you that if Michigan wins out, even if that means no entry to Indianapolis for the college football or for the Big Ten championship, they're not keeping a 1-loss Michigan State. They're not keeping a 1-loss Michigan team out of the college football playoff. They're just not doing it. You heard Gary Barta just say they wanted to put Michigan in front of Michigan State last week.
After they lost.
After they lost to them.
After they lost.
I'm just.
What
you
were they
heard what he
looking at?
said.
What are they looking at?
I think they're looking at.
What do you mean? What are they looking at? Okay, here's my thing. Let me just.
I got
I'm
you.
not. You see, I'm calm.
I'm calm, too.
I'm not. You are.
Right.
You're very
I'm calm.
calm. We're very calm. I got salmon on.
I was at that game.
I think the
Salmon
color
is
salmon
the
makes you
color.
calm.
Okay.
What they're looking at is this. The College Football Committee, their obligation is to look at film. It's called the eye test. That's when the eye test first came out. It came out with the BCS, but it really came into play with the College Football Committee because they were in charge of picking who was going to be in these spots. So they really watched these games. If they were watching a game, much like the rest of the country, because it's the highest rated game so far this year, Michigan was a better team than Michigan State on that day. You look at the cause, and I don't want to do the if thing. I heard what Mel Tucker said and all that, but it's a part of football. It's a part of sport.
It's a fact.
It's a part of sport. If you get the call right, the Michigan goes up by 2, but they go up 2 touchdowns going into half whip and getting the ball back.
Much different game.
It's a butt whooping. And then if you not count Kenneth Walker's touchdown, we didn't get the parallel horizontal angle, so we don't know if it was. That
was a touchdown.
Oh, let's say it was.
No one touched him.
That's at the end. You saw that they still only lost by 4. With that, yes, Michigan State came back. It was on the road. It was against a top 10 opponent who became a top 5 opponent. After that win, it was a great game. Michigan up and down. You look at the kicker. They have a better kicker. You look at the offensive line. They have a better offensive line. Rushing game, not running back in particular. Although I don't know. If Hassan Haskins didn't have Corum, we might be talking about a different guy. But with that being said, top to bottom.
As far as Haskins for the Heisman.
Exactly. Top to bottom. Michigan's a better team. They watched that game. And so they were like, you know what? Even though Michigan lost, we've seen games. You've seen games where you're like, the better team didn't win that game. Like
of course.
Whatever. And that was one of those games. And then here we are. Michigan State ends up losing to Purdue after they almost didn't want to pick them last week, so it makes sense.
And
for
everything went right for the Spartans in that game too. They were down 30-16. They touchdown, 2-point conversion, touchdown, 2-point conversion. Everything went right for them, and then they come and they follow that up with a loss at Purdue. I don't know if I'm a Michigan State fan. I'm probably flicking my eyes at this. But it's very simple. Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State. You can play it out. You play it out. You don't worry about what happened last week. But for Michigan, I do think it's a very good indication that if you handle your business, they want you in.
Okay.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead, man.
If Michigan, go ahead, bro.
Can you put a pin in this so I
course.
can take a break? We'll come back. We'll do this. Also, I want to ask you about Oregon and Ohio State, because you cannot convince me that if Oregon played Ohio State right now, Ohio State wouldn't beat Oregon.
Oh, they beat him at home.
A long time ago. A long time
Beat him in
ago.
Ohio.
They beat him at home. They beat him at home with a freshman quarterback, man. They were trying to figure it out.
So again, we'll get into this. They put Oregon in front of Ohio State.
This is fun.
Well, they put Oregon in front of Ohio State.
Like Kirk Herbst, you said last night. I could talk about this all day.
Right, because the head-to-head. Why not do that with Michigan State and Michigan? We'll continue this conversation, Ermanni and Edwards.
Woodward Sports Network, the bottom line.